The date is Tuesday, May 5th. I get up in the morning, and the first thing I see on my phone is an article from reporter Chris Johnson from The Athletic. And he writes that Austin Matthews is not sure if he's ready to come back for the 2026-27 campaign in Toronto. Now, I'm terrified. Austin Matthews has been the captain for 2 years now. He's been with the team since 2016, and he's their franchise player. He's their best goal scorer in franchise history. And he's considering leaving the Leafs. That's the hellhole we were looking at on Tuesday morning, to be specific. And all of Leafs Nation was petrified at the odds of Matthews leaving the city of Toronto and leaving the team with no other choice to rebuild. That was Tuesday. Today is Thursday, May the 7th, and the Leafs have won the 2026 NHL Draft Lottery. And a new report has come out that says Mckenna and his camp, as well as Matthews and his camp, are stoked for the opportunity to play with each other. Welcome back to the Chris Morana Show. This is going to be episode 3, where we have everything to talk about Leafs related. Now, since my last episode, Brad Treliving was actually still the general manager. So, for starters, he has been fired by the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I can't say it wasn't due. Treliving ran the NHL trade deadline this past year for the Leafs, and it was quite lackluster. The Leafs ended up trading Nick Waugh, Bobby McMahon, and Scott Laughton to some interesting deals. Nick Waugh, he made the day before the deadline, and quite frankly, it was quite a good deal. The Leafs got a first-round pick out of it and a fifth, I believe. Not a bad trade. It was off to a hot start, but quickly took a fall within the last hour of the deadline, moving Bobby McMahon and Scott Laughton for very minimal returns. Now, the Kings did make the playoffs, barely, so that pick will now turn from a third-round pick to a second, and the Bobby McMahon trade will stay at a second-round pick. Overall, Brad Treliving's tenure with the Leafs was a quick one, but he did get some efficient business done, signing 2 key players during that time that will still be signed with them. First one is John Tavares. Now, John Tavares, you could argue, was always going to stay in Toronto after his contract was up, given where he was at in his career, the fact that he wouldn't want to move his family out of Toronto, his home, now. And he's not going to be getting a long-term comfort deal anywhere else other than here. So, to that which he signed. Now, I will give Brad Treliving credit, $4.35 million per year. It's quite good for your second-line center, and quite good for a guy like John Tavares, who provides a lot of non-numbers-based analytics and non-numbers-based value to your team. So, fantastic signing. The second one is the future, and that is Austin Matthews. That's another good contract, but we'll have to talk about that later. Matthew Knies. Now, Matthew Knies is now signed for 5 more seasons at $7.75 million a season. Given the other contracts that people around his age, 23 mind you, have been getting, that's an absolute steal. His production and his pace to become one of the league's best power forwards is unlike something that we've ever seen here in Toronto, maybe since Zach Hyman. So it's quite a new comfort having a young piece locked up for a reasonable cap hit that's going to provide value, increasing value, now that he gets older and ages into the NHL. So, once again, thank you, Brad Treliving, for those 2 contracts, along with all the other pieces you've signed. Thank you for the awful deadline this past season. Thank you for giving us the scare all season of losing our first-round pick to the Boston Bruins. And good luck with your next job. Next on the docket is his replacement, John Chayka, former Arizona Coyotes general manager, and notably not had a job in the NHL for 6 years, notably a Wendy's franchisee. However, John Chayka has had a lot of controversy surrounding him this last week and 2 leading up to his hiring. And one thing I will say is it was a long time ago now in retrospect to the league. Obviously, he's still a young GM, a young executive in this league. He's only 36 years old, and he's had some experience under his belt in Arizona, which I will put an asterisk on because it is Arizona. Now, what he did in Arizona was nothing special. He could have turned a lot of interesting pieces, and he could have turned that franchise into not what it is today, which is not a franchise anymore, as the Arizona Coyotes have moved to Utah. I think this criticisms of his that I've been seeing in the league, particularly Steve Simmons at the press conference, we will get to that, is expected, is understandable, and is deserved. You have not been in the league for 6 years. You're going to come to a rude awakening. Now, do I think this is a bad hire? Compared to what was out there, no. I think it was really him or Scott White that would have got the finalist position. I think Scott White from the Dallas Stars is a great option, and I think he will soon to be a GM probably as soon as this offseason, provided Dallas doesn't retain him. John Chayka is still a young guy. He's still a young mind in the NHL, and he's what Keith Pelly has been looking for, which was told as an analytical guy. Sort of a Dubas-like guy in terms of his thought process, but heavy on data-centered analytics. Now, is that something that we should be thankful for? Is that something we should be concerned about? I think an analytical approach is something that is a new generation thing that teams have been adapting. I think analytics play a huge part in how an organization is run. Most teams, especially the top-heavy teams like Toronto, have their own analytics teams. It's not just the GM. It's not just the senior vice president. It's not just those guys who are analytical. They have teams designated for high-level and deep analytics that come into play when you're signing players, when you're making trades, when you're drafting guys. It's all a part of that whole process for your entire year. And I think it's a smart way to go. When you look at teams that have been succeeding recently, you look obviously to the Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights are a pretty analytical and results-based organization. They are very cutthroat, unlike the Leafs. The Leafs tend to hang on to their guys quite a bit, which again we'll get into particularly with their coach. And the Florida Panthers are a little less analytical. I will say they find an identity and they stick with that identity in their play. You see guys like Brad Marchand getting traded there and Sam Bennett signing extensions, Matthew Tkachuk getting traded there. That's their identity. They are a bunch of rats. There's a reason they throw plastic rats onto the ice. It's because that's their identity. And it's a crucial thing for a team to have an identity and have a response to what the league expects of you. Everyone knows what the league expects from the Florida Panthers. They're going to be a gritty team. They're going to be a nasty team to play. They're a team you don't want to go up against in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And what Toronto needs to do under this new management is find their identity. And I think analytics could be a crucial part of that. And John Chayka will be responsible for putting that new face into the organization. The second hire that was made alongside John Chayka is former captain and longtime Leaf legend Mats Sundin. His role is a bit interesting in this office. Could you call it a forced role just to get him in the door? Sure, you could. Is it a needed role? And if you're looking at it as a basic team thing, I'm going to say no. Do the Leafs need to have this role, specifically to have him in this office? Absolutely. He provides something that not a lot of Leafs have ever had, and that is passion for the game to the level of making a deep playoff run, understanding what a team needs to do well in the playoffs in Toronto. Not many people have learned or had the opportunity to learn what that's like. The last Stanley Cup won in Toronto was in 1967. There are very few people from that team who are even still alive right now. And one of the few people who have had some decent playoff success since then is Captain Matt Sundin. He went to the Eastern Conference Finals a few times with Toronto. He scored an insane buzzer beater against the Hurricanes. He is the guy that you're going to want in that room to help teach these guys how to get it done. And I think having him in that locker room, specifically for two players, that is Matthews as a captain-to-captain connection and Nylander for that Sweden connection. I think both of those things will come to a huge part of Sundin's role with the team. And I think aside from his actual duties, will hold as a anchor for them because some relation can be made. It's not as simple as Brendan Shanahan being there. Oh, I'm a former player, so give me some respect, give me some understanding. I know how to win. It's a different market. It's a different expectation. It's a different history. And it's a different style. The Leafs need to learn to play more like Matt Sundin and his era of the Leafs, along with the skills that the current team has. Now, speaking of skills that the current team has, they're going to be getting a new one with Gavin Mckenna because the Leafs lucked their way into keeping their first rounder from that Boston trade for Brandon Carlo and will not only keep it, but draft first overall at the 2026 NHL entry draft. It is a miracle that the Leafs ended up keeping this pick to begin with. It is a preposterous idea that they would have got the first overall pick. And yet here we are. The Leafs will hold the first selection for the first time since 2016, where Captain Austin Matthews was drafted. Funny enough, both in Buffalo. Now, I've heard some people talk about trading this pick and sending it off either for a key piece to add to your blue line, trade down for maybe a defenseman in the draft and get some other first-round picks in there. I heavily disagree with any narrative to trade this pick at all. The only narrative I will accept for trading the first overall pick in the draft is for one trade and one trade only. And that would be to pull McDavid out of Edmonton early and get him in Toronto. Now, is that a reasonable expectation? Absolutely not. We don't even know if Edmonton wants to trade him at all. We don't know if McDavid wants to trade a trade from Edmonton. But they just recently got eliminated by the Anaheim Ducks in the first round in 6 games after making it to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but time's ticking for Edmonton. And sooner or later, whether it's 2028 or whether it's sooner, he's going to be on a different team. Unless the Oilers can, A, find a goalie, and B, go win a cup. So that's up to the Oilers, but it's an interesting trade chip for that sense. If it's not McDavid, you draft Mckenna. At the first overall pick, in my perspective, you always draft best available because if you're getting the first overall pick, normally, you're a pretty bad team. And the Leafs were bad. Bad enough to finish 5th? Well, they did. Some might say. They did finish 5th, so clearly they were bad enough to finish 5th. Well, a lot of people can argue, and I am one of these people, that they played down to their expectation and their ability. They had a lot of injuries. Look at Chris Tanev, you look at Austin Matthews, look at Anthony Stolarz, look at Matthew Nyes for some of the year. A lot of these guys played hurt and were hurt during the year. Now, that's not to say the Leafs were playing great when they were there. They definitely weren't. Don't worry, your eyes did not deceive you. You watched the 25-26 Leafs. They sucked. I think one thing is for sure. I think there's no way that they're that bad. I think that on a normal year with somewhat normal expectation, they would have ended up picking between 5 and 10. They're now picking first. I think you have to draft best available. I think you can look at a Chase Reed and be like, okay, that's a great option on defense. Is it as great as option as Gavin Mckenna? Some people have been arguing that Gavin Mckenna is not a generational talent. In about 54 games, I believe, he had 129 points. I saw a stat that was comparing him with McDavid. In roughly the same amount of games, I believe McDavid had played maybe 3 more games. McDavid had 99 points, McKenna 129. Obviously, minor league numbers are a lot different than NHL translated numbers, but it's something to look at. McKenna definitely isn't a McDavid. I wouldn't even go as far to say he's a Bedard, but he's a McKenna. And one thing he can do is play make. And what did the Leafs lose less than a year ago? Mitch Marner, best playmaker in franchise history. And now you have not only a playmaker, but someone to finally play on the left wing of Austin Matthews. You have not had someone with that level of talent available to them since maybe Zach Hyman. And Zach Hyman was not a lefty shot. They played 3 righties. It was unbelievable. The Leafs have not had a left winger. A lot of people talk about having centers. Like, the Leafs don't have enough centers. They don't have enough centers. Not had a left winger in forever. In forever. Matthew Nyes is the lone exception who has mainly been playing with John Tavares, not even with Austin Matthews. So having McKenna in that spot can finally fill that hole and that need. You could now have a top 6 of McKenna, Matthews, Nylander, Tavares, Nyes, and whoever the hell else. Cowan you have in there. You've got Domi available there, Michelli available there. Guys potentially there. Speaking of guys, that's going to lead into my next segment. NHL free agency. Now, the 2026 free agency class was this big thing where, we have Kaprizov, we have McDavid, we have Quinn Hughes and, not Quinn Hughes. We have Panarin. All these guys are available free agents. And now that free agency class has shriveled away. The best option in the free agency class, who I think the Leafs should really look out after, Darren Raddysh of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, Darren is 30 years old. I'll fact check that in a second. Let me just pull that up. I believe he's 30 years old. And he has been a core piece of the Lightning this season. Now, before this season, he was quite the breakout candidate. Let's see what I can find. 30 years old. And if we take a look at his stats here, his Hockey DB page, this season, in 73 games, he had 22 goals and 48 assists for 70 points. Wow. 70-point defenseman. Now, guess how much he was making? Some of you may say $5 million. Some may say $3.5 million. Some may say $2 million. Some may think he's on a steal at like a $1.5 million deal. You'd be close. He's on a steal. He's making $975,000 a season. Now, some of you are going to look at that and be like, wow, he's on a steal of a contract. How did they sign him to that? Well, that's because the seasons before, in the same amount of games played in 73, he had 6 goals, 31 assists for 37 points. Yikes. Now, is that season bad? No, not bad. It's not 70 points. It's not 22 goals. He increased his goal total by 16. It's quite the margin. Now, some of you may ask, okay, the season before, what did he have? Okay. In 82 games, more games. Same amount of goals with 6, 27 assists. Now, both those years, the Tampa Bay Lightning were a first-round exit. Not to say it was his fault. His defense was all right. But no consequence of the run. And some of you I know are saying, well, Chris, he's 30 years old. Surely he was on the two teams that went to the Cup final at least and won. They actually went to the final 3 years in a row. The one year they lost was to the Avalanche. You're correct. He was on the team, at least under contract. Both those years, he spent times with the Syracuse Crunch of the AHL and the Hartford Wolfpack. Now, in 2022-23 in Syracuse, the year that they went to the Cup final against the Avs, he played 4 games at the NHL level. 0 goals, 0 assists, 0 penalty minutes, 0 nothing. In 50 AHL games, 13 goals, 38 assists for 51 points. Not terrible. Not terrible. With a plus-minus of 19. That's sounding a lot more like his NHL season today. Now, at the rate that this is going to go with him, 70-point defenseman who is in a very dead free agency class, he's going to be projected to make around $11.5 million, which to me is ridiculous if you're the average NHL team. The Maple Leafs are not the average NHL team. They are the richest team in the NHL, bar none, with the richest owners in the world in Rogers Entertainment. Sign them. You have not had that opportunity to sign a defenseman like that in a long time. Is it an overpayment? Sure. I got news for you. Every free agent is an overpayment. You sign them. That's your blue line edition. So you want to work in the blue line? That's the blue line. Unless you can make a trade not involving first overall, that's your blue line. As for the rest of the NHL free agency class, it's not that great. It's okay at best. So what you'll need to do is find some diamonds in the rough. That's what you're going to have to do. Other teams have done it. You have done it. You'll be able to find diamonds in the rough. But that's for July 1st. Let's focus on June 26th when you're going to take the next franchise great in Gavin Mckenna. That's going to be it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. I will see you next time. Peace.